I'm joined by Kevin Guthrie, Florida Division Emergency Management Executive Director, Major General John Haas from the Florida National Guard, and our Commissioner of Agriculture, Wilton Simpson. Before I get into Idalia, we do have an update on the Jacksonville shooting. I was working with some of the local officials as well as the president of Edward Waters College to see what kind of support we can provide. So I'm pleased to be able to announce we're going to be able to do $1 million to Edward Waters College to increase security on campus. As I've said for the last couple of days, we are not going to allow our HBCUs to be targeted by these people, and so we're going to provide security help with them. We also have FDLE on site today evaluating security on campus and making recommendations for any additional infrastructure improvements. Also, per the request at yesterday's vigil, we're able to do $100,000 to the charity that's supporting the victims' families, and those funds are all coming from Volunteer Florida. So we're going to continue to work with those folks in the days and weeks ahead. As of 0800 today, 90 miles south of Cuba, Tropical Storm Idalia continues to gather strength. It will become a hurricane today, and it is forecast to reach landfall as a major hurricane, a Category 3. I think it's important to point out, if we were sitting here 3 days ago, a lot of people thought it would end up being a tropical storm. Then they said, well, maybe a Category 1. Then yesterday it was, oh, maybe it'll hit Cat 2. Now there really doesn't seem anything to prevent it from continuing to strengthen. And we've seen this before with something like Hurricane Michael that continued to gather strength. So this is going to be a major impact, and Floridians should expect that this storm will be a major Cat 3 plus hurricane. So please prepare accordingly. The National Hurricane Center currently has hurricane watches in effect for the Gulf Coast from Sarasota County all the way up to Franklin County in northwestern Florida. And this track, if you look at how the models are, there's a general agreement on the track that it's going to take. There's a lot of agreement that it's going to be, somewhere between north of Tampa and Tallahassee. But anything that wobbles with this storm could change that. So pretty much anybody on the west coast of Florida, I mean, you can see major impacts, and so please prepare accordingly. We did submit a pre-landfall declaration to the federal government last night. We anticipate that will be approved. I have expanded our state of emergency, the executive order, to include 13 additional counties, so that'll be 46 that are under a state of emergency, of course, on the Gulf Coast, but also as you look at the track of that storm, you're going to see northern Florida, north central Florida, northeastern Florida counties affected as well. So all of those counties are under a state of emergency. Our state EOC is operating at a level 1, 24-hour operations. This is what we do. Now, all counties in the path of Idalia should have their emergency operations centers activated now. Please request aid from the state as soon as possible. There's a relatively limited window here. If you request aid, Kevin and his team are going to get it to you. But if you wait until 6-8 hours before the storm hits, it's going to be much more difficult to make that happen. So tell us what your needs are, submit those requests, and Kevin and his team are going to work to fill those requests as expeditiously as possible. Evacuation orders. I urge Floridians to heed the admonitions and heed the directives from your local officials. There are going to be evacuation orders issued in all these Gulf Coast counties in the A and B zones. All the barrier islands, places that are low-lying on the coast, you are going to be told to evacuate. So just understand that, and that'll be true probably from Pinellas, maybe even Manatee, all the way up through the Big Bend. Keep in mind, if you're told to evacuate, you do not need to drive hundreds of miles. You do not need to leave the state of Florida. You basically need to go to higher ground. Almost every instance, you can go tens of miles to a shelter, to a hotel, to a friend's house, whatever works for you, and you'll be able to ride out the storm. The key is to not be in those areas that are going to be hit with big-time storm surge and that are going to potentially have life-threatening situations. And so tens of miles not necessarily need hundreds of miles, and the more people that do a more limited evacuation, more local evacuation, you're not going to have the highways and the roads clogged. So it's not necessary to try to outrun the storm. Just get to higher ground, get in a structure that is going to be able to handle the hurricane, ride it out, and then you'll be able to go back to your property and inspect whatever damage is. So more local evacuations. You do not need to flee to Alabama, Georgia. You don't need to drive hundreds and hundreds of miles. Now, fuel. We have 35 bobtails and 15 tankers of fuels are en route to Central Florida, 2 pre-staged with a couple 100,000 gallons of fuel. We had limited fuel interruptions with Hurricane Ian, but you never know how that works, so we want to be able to have fuel to be able to get that back on target as soon as the storm passes. We have 7 urban search and rescue teams ready to deploy to impacted areas, and of course we have Florida Highway Patrol, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, Florida Fish and Wildlife, all those folks will be ready to go. So as soon as that storm passes, they will be on the ground helping out Floridians. We have 2,500 guardsmen and airmen that are pre-staged, but 3,000 more are currently being mobilized and are on the way for a total of 5,500. And they'll have at their disposal 2,400 high-wheel vehicles, 12 aircraft. Kevin is also requesting through the EMAC additional rotary wing assets from other states, and we anticipate that those requests will be fulfilled. Schools. Hernando County schools are closed today, Citrus and Levy tomorrow. There will be more counties to come in terms of school closures, and so parents just understand that that's coming down the pike. That, of course, is a local decision that will be made on a district-by-district basis, but I think people should anticipate school closures along the Gulf Coast of Florida for both Tuesday and Wednesday, and perhaps even beyond that. Power. There are tens of thousands of linemen that will be staged, and resources will be staged, and they will be surged to the impacted areas. The goal is to get the power restored as quickly as possible. Floridians in the path of this storm, just be prepared to lose power. This is going to come in, if it's Cat 3 plus, there's going to be a lot of trees that are going to get knocked down. There's going to be a lot of debris that is going to interrupt the power lines. So just understand that is something that's going to happen. These linemen will be ready to go and connect again. Now, some of the companies that do this very routinely, like Florida Power and Light or Duke, they have what they need, they're going to do. Some of the smaller outfits, municipal outfits, county outfits, please accept mutual aid. Please accept these linemen to come help and accelerate the power restoration. It matters. It makes a big difference. Even in a storm like Hurricane Ian, as damaging as that was, the vast majority of people, even in Southwest Florida, did not suffer a catastrophic loss. And so to get all those people back on as soon as possible, it makes the recovery so much more impactful, so much more effective. So those folks are there. They're going to be surged. And if you're in one of those outfits, please accept the mutual aid right at the beginning. And also, please have a plan that as soon as that storm goes, have a sense of urgency to have your folks go and get the power restored. I can tell you the places that did that after Ian, it worked a lot better. When there was a delay, then just people get frustrated. So we believe that time is of the essence when it comes to power restoration, and we have the folks available that can be helpful. Generator safety. We've had a lot of new people move to Florida over these last many years. Some got their first taste of a hurricane last year with Ian, but we've had many people move in even since Hurricane Ian. When you're using a generator, you cannot run your generator inside your house. You could die with carbon monoxide poisoning. So it's got to be outdoors only, and it needs to be at least 20 feet away from the windows and from the doors, and the exhaust needs to be pointed away from your home. So please operate the generator properly. We've had throughout the years in Florida generators operating in people's garages or even people's homes, and it's just not something that's going to work, and it could definitely be deadly. So generator safety. Kevin is going to come up and provide an update from the EM perspective. Wilton Simpson's also going to come up and provide an update on the gas situation emanating out of the port of Tampa with the diesel. All Floridians, you need to be executing your plans now. I mean, this storm is scheduled to come probably sometime on early Wednesday. And there's different times when it could come that maybe the storm surge wouldn't be as bad if it's at low tide, and so we'll hope that that's the case. But you're in the home stretch right here. So go to floridadisaster.org/get-a-plan, floridadisaster.org/get-a-plan. This is going to be a major hurricane. This is going to be a powerful hurricane, and this is absolutely going to impact the state of Florida in many, many different ways. So please heed the directives from your local officials. Please make the appropriate accommodations and take the appropriate precautions. We'll have all these people there. They're going to be able to help everyone get back on their feet. But you got to do what you need to do to protect yourself and your family on the front end. Okay, Kevin Guthrie.
Thank you, Governor. I want to thank the Governor for his leadership, his steadfast leadership throughout the last now probably a week that he and I have been talking about this storm. As of 8 a.m. this morning, Tropical Storm Idalia was located about 375 miles southwest of Key West. Idalia has maximum sustained winds this morning of 65 miles an hour and is forecast to strengthen throughout the day as it moves northward into the Gulf of Mexico. As you can see on our chart here, it's about at 1 a.m. Wednesday morning, it's going to be about 80 miles due west of Pinellas County. And with that is going to be in that general area about 4 to 7, perhaps 7 to 10 feet of storm surge. I expect that storm surge watch and warning will be altered today to coincide with the strengthening of this hurricane. We have been talking a lot with meteorologists across the state as well as emergency managers across the state to make sure that individuals do not get stuck on the cone. If you look at this cone on this graphic that we have here to the left, those watches and warnings for storm surge go all the way down to the Collier-Monroe County line and all the way around to the Gulf Bay County line. Storm surge can be life-threatening at just 2 to 3 feet. Some of these areas are going to experience storm surge well over 7 foot. There's not a person in this room that's over 7 foot tall. So again, please make sure you're heeding the warnings of local emergency managers. The governor just spoke today that you will most likely hear and see evacuation orders start to come out from the Tampa Bay region all the way northward through the Big Bend. The ones that will be given those orders are your local emergency managers and or local sheriffs. When they ask for that emergency evacuation to be implemented, please heed their warnings. Again, go tens of miles, not hundreds of miles. I want to stress again, if your community is not in the forecast cone, it does not mean you are clear. Please look at all of the watches and warnings. As in Hurricane Ian, the very first warning that we had that something was going bad was a tornado in Palm Beach County. We are going to have tornadic activity with this. People need statewide to monitor their local emergency management agency, their local National Weather Service to find out what's going on. We encourage every Floridian along the Gulf Coast to begin enacting their emergency preparedness plans now. Now is not necessarily the time to write a plan. Now is the time to action a plan. Our governor is here doing his job to ensure the state emergency response team has every resource at our disposal to respond efficiently to the storm. I'm doing my job as a state coordinating officer. Local emergency management directors are doing their jobs as local coordination officers. It's now time for you to do your job and make sure that you're getting your family ready to go. Have you taken that time to identify your chosen evacuation route? Do you know if you live in an evacuation zone or not? Do you have a plan for your family? This storm is coming and it is strengthening in intensity. It is up to you to ensure that your home, your business, and your family are prepared. That being said, there is some time to finalize that plan. Make sure you and your family know your plan, including seniors and children. Download movies, TV shows, make sure your battery-powered operation devices are fully charged, that you have battery backups for those. If you're in your yard, you can pick it up. You should put it up. If you can't pick it up, you need to tie it down. This storm poses a significant storm surge threat to our coastal and low-lying area communities, as I've already mentioned. It is now the time to find out what evacuation zone you live in, because we evacuate based on storm surge. You can find that out by going to floridadisaster.org/know/KNOW to learn what your evacuation zone is that you live in. Several counties have already initiated their protective measures and are getting ready to initiate those evacuation orders. So we remind you to, again, pay close attention to what they have. The governor's already said it, but I'll reiterate it again. One of our slogans is evacuate tens of miles, not hundreds of miles. So please just get to the nearest, safest place that you can. Often that's going to be with friends and families first, shelters second, and then hotels third. Please make sure you're heading in that direction. If you have an electric vehicle, make sure you keep it as fully charged as possible during this time. If you need fuel, again, halfway full is halfway there. We want you to keep that tank halfway full. Keep your electric charged cars halfway full on their charge as well. For anything that you may need from us, please make sure you go to floridadisaster.org/updates. Again, that's floridadisaster.org/updates for additional information. I will mention just before I turn it back over to the governor, I have spoken with all of the coastal county EM directors from Manatee County all the way up to Levy County. I have left a message for the Citrus County EM director. They are in the process of starting to ramp up their initial request to us, and I appreciate them doing that. But again, we need inland counties to do the same thing. We need Big Bend counties to do the same thing. If you're anywhere from north of Tampa Bay all the way up into Apalachicola Bay, you are going to be impacted by this disaster. Governor, again, thank you for your leadership, and thanks for all you do for us.
First of all, I just want to also thank the governor for his leadership. He's done a tremendous job getting us through hurricanes under his tenure, and we're very proud to be part of that team. We yesterday we identified contaminated fuel in Central Florida, the Tampa Bay area coming out of the port, and we have 29 gas stations that we were told that this fuel went to. We have inspected 3. We've gotten the results back of 3 of them now. 1 was clear. 2 have got to be evacuated. We're working with DEM to get those fuels evacuated and replaced with clean fuel. By the end of the day, we hope to have all of those gas stations identified, which ones can open up, and we're going to work on that. Rick Kimsey and his team at the Consumer Services Division is doing a great job identifying the stations and identifying which fuel is contaminated. You know, the Department of Agriculture is going to be heavily involved in this cleanup, working with DEM and Kevin and his team. Our foresters are ready. We have our chainsaw crews. We have our equipment. We are ready to go in and started helping with the evacuation process. We're looking for DOT waivers. We're going to be receiving those this morning to make sure that we can move commodities around the state. There are numerous. They're on our website, but it includes animal feeds, aquaculture, cattle eggs, fuel, fertilizers, agrochemicals, peanuts, tomatoes, forestry products. It's very important that we protect our supply chain during this process and our food and fiber. Dr. Short is working on those waivers, and our team. Bianca Colin is working on our food and wellness system. We have over 3 million gallons of water in the Orlando area, 1.5 million MREs ready to go to bring into the affected areas. We're also looking for mosquito controls. Anyone listening that is a part of a mosquito control, after we get large amounts of water dumped in our state, we're going to have to be out taking care of those areas. The Department of Agriculture is here to be helpful if necessary. Our Ag Law team, led by Colonel Adams, is going to be working with also FWC. We have local reconnaissance units. We want everyone not to be there when that storm hits. We do not want to find people in their homes, and we want them to evacuate. This is clearly going to be a major hurricane, but the Ag Law enforcement will be there and also there to help your local sheriff's office recover as needed. Our marketing division, led by Susan McKinley, we're working with Red Cross, FPL, the co-ops to stage at our farmers markets, and we're looking forward to working with them. We'll also be volunteering on the ground. And I did speak this morning very early with Senator Scott about the bill that's coming up here, the Farm Bill. We hope to get that passed this year to make sure that agriculture is considered in this farm bill. We've still not gotten a lot of relief from Ian and the agriculture community. We're looking for block grants coming through the Department of Agriculture at the federal level, through our Department of Agriculture, so that we can help farmers recover in this area. We need these commodities online, and we need to make sure we protect our supply chain. And again, this governor is very well prepared for this job. Unfortunately, we've been through several together, and I know his leadership is going to prevail here. And just stay safe. Thank you.
So we have Monday today. You know, you have time to do what you need to do. You'll have some time tomorrow too, Tuesday. You know, as we get later in the day, you know, you're going to start seeing potential impacts, wind and some rain and whatnot. So just understand that that's what it's looking like. I think as we get into the late Tuesday, early Wednesday, it's going to start to get really nasty. And of course, they're anticipating a landfall sometime Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon. So you have time to make the preparations. You have time to do what you need to do to protect yourself and your family. So if you are in the path of this storm, anywhere on that Gulf Coast, from the Tampa Bay area all the way up to Franklin County in Northwest Florida, just prepare for major impacts. This track has been a little bit more consistent than maybe some in the past, but one wobble one way or another, you know, you could start to see even more impacts in places. And just because you're not in the eye of the cone does not mean that you're not going to face major impacts. So now's the time to take those actions, and we will be we will be there, of course, on the back end to help with all the search efforts. Hopefully we don't need to do that because people have taken the proper precautions, but we will be ready to do that. We will be ready to work on the power restoration. We will be ready to work on the fuel restoration as soon as the storm passes. But now's the time to take the appropriate precautions. We do expect Hurricane Idalia to be a major hurricane that will strike the state of Florida. Okay, any questions?
Governor, I'm curious how you're feeling about the property insurance market. We've obviously seen some concerning things over the last couple of weeks. We saw insurers pull out, some use and say they're not going to be renewing some of their policies. How are you feeling as this major hurricane now approaches?
Well, we've also seen a number that have entered the market, which we had not been seeing for a long time. So I think that, and they cited the reforms that we did. Obviously, I wouldn't want a storm. I mean, that would have been better for us, for sure, to not have a storm. But I think that how the people that have gotten into the market will be able to respond to the storm would likely be more feasible and sustainable than prior to our reform. So you'd rather not have it, but I do think the fact that people are coming into the market for the first time in a long time shows that we identified problems and that we offered good solutions.
Could you address a little bit the communication looked like so far with the White House? I mean, have you had any, do you have any concerns with communicating with the Biden administration considering you're running for Biden's job?
No, I mean, look, I think when you have situations like this, you've got to put the interests of the people first. I mean, you know, there's time and a place to have political season, but then there's a time and a place to say that this is something that's life-threatening. This is something that could potentially cost somebody their life. It could cost them their livelihood. And we have a responsibility as Americans to come together and do what we can to mitigate any damage and to protect people. So that's what I've done on all these different issues, and that's what I'll continue to do. When you have these situations, you got to step up.
The danger of focusing on the cone with, you know, the tendency of the storm to wobble. Could you address that a little bit more?
Yeah, look, I mean, so, you know, when we were doing Ian, if you remember that, Ian hit on a Wednesday afternoon. The Sunday, we were here, and it was going to hit Cedar Key, right? It ended up doing an impact on Sanibel Island. That's where it impacted on Wednesday afternoon. So if it wobbles as it approaches Cuba, if it wobbles, that could take the whole track in a different direction. And so you're looking at really from Collier all the way up to Franklin. It is possible, I mean, if it wobbled west, then Collier would probably have more minimal impacts. If it wobbles east, then Collier would have more. Opposite for somebody like Franklin County. So people just need to be prepared. You should not be too wedded on this. And if you remember, I mean, we've had examples of major impacts outside the cone, even as it was going. Pensacola a few years ago. You said it wasn't even in the cone. Then the next morning, downtown Pensacola is underwater. So people should just understand that and understand that this is an important storm. Now, the models are much more in convergence on this one than on Ian. That is true. And so what the Hurricane Center does, what that cone really is it's just kind of like splits the difference amongst all the models. So with Ian, you had one model that had to go into the Panhandle. The rest were closer to the peninsula. And that caused it, I think, to be a little bit more northwest than it should have been. This one, though, most of them are converging on this. But we're going to know probably more over the next 12 hours on the track. Once it gets into the Gulf, it's kind of smooth sailing for this thing. I mean, it's likely to continue to gain intensification. We don't know how quickly it's going to go. I mean, it could potentially start moving quick. So there's a lot of things to be watching here, but just know if you're on that Gulf Coast, particularly if you're in the Barrier Islands, you are going to get some type of storm surge. I mean, there's just no question. And is it going to be Ian level if you're in Collier or Lee? Probably not. But is it going to be significant? I mean, if you're in Pinellas County or Pasco, could you have really, really significant storm surge and flooding? Absolutely. Could you have really significant storm surge in Levy and Dixie counties? Yes, no question about that. So just prepare for that. And that's the thing, when you look at these storms, yes, if you're outside when the wind's blowing 100 miles an hour, you could get hit with debris. That could be fatal. But most of the fatalities are with the storm surge. And so if you protect yourself from the storm surge by evacuating inland when you're told to do that, the chance of you suffering a major incident for yourself personally or your family's health and well-being goes down dramatically. Now, the property, we can rebuild someone's home. You can deal with the property damage. You can't unring the bell, though, if somebody stays in harm's way and does battle with Mother Nature. This is not something that you want to do battle with.
So based on what happened with Ian, I mean, are there conversations you're having with local officials or Director Guthrie regarding evacuations and doing things a little bit more differently from Ian, or any lessons learned from what happened?
Conversations?
So we meet with our county EM directors virtually every single day, twice a day when we get into this. Again, I've made phone calls to every one of these county emergency managers in this general area. My history, I'm from Pasco County. I was there before I came here, so I know all of those directors on a first name basis. I worked alongside of them. They are prepared. They are making those necessary notifications. We've had those conversations. But again, for the first time ever, Florida first, as we like to say here with the governor, is we were the first state in the country that brought all meteorologists together in the off season this last year. About 6-7 weeks ago, we had a meeting with all statewide meteorologists, local meteorologists on television, as well as local forecasting centers, the National Hurricane Center, the Storm Prediction Center. We brought them all together to talk about this very thing, which is we need to better communicate not this cone, but all of these other watches and warnings. That's where we had problems. Again, if you go back to Lee County and Hurricane Ian, when that cone was pretty much where it's at today for Hurricane Ian, there were the same watches and warnings that were 6 feet very early on. We've got to stop focusing on the cone. We've got to focus on all watches and warnings and heed those watches and warnings. 1 cubic yard of water, 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot, is 1,700 pounds. That is going to move furniture in your house. That is going to move your vehicle. You do not want to be in your home when that stuff is being moved around. It could pin you against the wall. You can drown. You could die from blunt force trauma. Those are deaths that are 100% preventable.
Governor, in July you said that we should be knocking on wood that a major hurricane doesn't happen as we wait for insurance reforms to take effect. Obviously, we're in a situation nobody wants us to be in right now, but do you think it may be time to have another special session on further insurance reforms?
Well, look, I think we've got to get through this. I mean, this is going to be our sole focus. We've got a lot that's been mobilized as it should be done, and we're going to bring all these resources to bear once the storm hits, and we want to make sure people get on their feet. And so I think that's what we're going to be focused on now. I'm always I've always wanted to do more than the legislature's wanted to do. We got the legislature to do a lot more this year than we've ever had. So whatever's down the pike that could be beneficial to the market, I'm all ears for. But I definitely think we've got to get through this. We're going to have a lot of people going to need to help get back on their feet. I'm proud of how we've been able to handle these, where we really take the bull by the horns and we go in. We have we planned ahead. We have a disaster fund in the state of Florida that we are able to dip into to be able to help doing all this stuff. I mean, all this pre-staging, it doesn't happen for free. You've got to put resources behind it. You put resources behind it to prepare. Sometimes you may not need to use all these resources, but I would rather put money out, be prepared, and then not have to use it than the opposite. And so I think it's been really good the way we've budgeted for this. And then if you remember with Hurricane Ian, when we rebuilt those bridges, we just paid for it. The state paid for it. I didn't wait for the federal government. I didn't wait for local government. We just took care of it. Same thing with some of the housing mission. We created our own housing mission from the state. That had always been done by FEMA, and FEMA did do some stuff, but we were putting trailers on people's front yards so that they can rehab their homes and had a place to stay on their property, so they weren't having to live in a hotel or living in some RV park. So we're proud of how we've done that. We're going to lean in the same way on this storm.
On the fuel leak, when did that actually happen, and how long did it take for your department to find out about it?
So we believe Saturday. It was through DOT, through a weight measurement. Diesel is, I believe, much heavier than gasoline. We realized that there was a contamination. So our team, headed by Rick Kimsey, went into effect. By Sunday morning, we knew that there was a contamination. We knew there had been human error. And I'm giving you dates from through the weekend. But the reality was, as soon as we knew there was a potential contamination, we put out a notice. Within just an hour or so after that first notice went out, we received a notice from Citco telling us which stations where the manifest had led that fuel to be. Our team mobilized yesterday morning and started pulling samples, and we are still pulling samples today. We hope by this evening to have sampled all of the gas stations on the list, which I believe were 29.
Governor, could you speak to the intensifying of the storm? I mean, this is a storm that's really quickly intensifying, more than originally planned, and it's going into the Gulf, which, many scientists say that it's the warm water contributed by climate change is really intensifying these storms. What do you think is contributing to this?
Well, I think it's, unfortunately, I see a lot of parallels with Hurricane Michael. Hurricane Michael, if you remember, a few days before, we knew there would be a storm. Nobody was saying that it was going to be a Category 5 storm. That just was not what people were saying, and then it intensified, and that it delivered a major, major impact to Northwest Florida that we're still recovering from. And so this one was something that if we were talking on Friday, most of the people were saying it'd be a tropical storm, maybe inch into a Cat 1. And every single update has intensified it a little bit more and more. So we are bracing for a major hurricane impact, Category 3 plus. Hopefully it doesn't get much worse than a Category 3, but the reality is you got basically clear sailing for this thing. You've got waters that are warm, and there's not really going to be much to slow it down. So we can hope for the best, but I think we've got to prepare for the worst. And so all Floridians right now, this is your time to be able to take the precautions that you need to be able to protect yourself, your family, your property. Expect impacts from this storm if you're on the Gulf Coast of Florida, particularly from the Tampa Bay area up through the Big Bend region. We will be back here doing another update at some point today, and I may be going to other parts of Florida to meet with some of the folks on the ground in some of the areas that we expect to face a major impact. So we'll have more updates for you soon. Thanks.
Worst case scenario, how far could a +3 put the state back?